Good evening, everybody. I am Lynn Gilman. I'm the National President of CHW. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We have a wonderful evening in store for you. We have with us Sharon, Neiss, Arbess, and Rebecca Eckler, two amazing women. And Rebecca Eckler will be interviewing author of The Most Amazing Department Store book by Sharon, Neiss, Arbess for us tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about both these women. Sharon, Neiss, Arbess was born in Montreal and is the author not only of The Most Amazing Department Store, but also of Me and My So-Called Friends, as well as Get Up. She is the producer of Brave the Waves, a teacher's manual for middle school students. Sharon has written for Living Legacies, a collection of narratives by contemporary Canadian Jewish women, the Toronto Star, and other publications. She's an alumna of Concordia University's Communications Studies program, as well as Algonquin College Creative Advertising program in Ottawa. Sharon lives in Toronto with her husband and her 3 children. Rebecca Eckler is the founder of Rebooks, a leading independent publishing house. Eckler helps women get their books published from the big idea to the sellers list. Rebooks' motto is what's good is read and what's read is good. Eckler is a 10 times internationally best-selling author. She was a columnist at the National Post for 15 years, and her works have appeared in numerous publications across North America, including the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times. Her latest memoir is titled Blissfully Blended Bullshit: The Uncomfortable Truth of Blended Families. You can find her at www.rebooks.ca. After the interview, Lisa Cole-Kotler will be moderating a Q&A session, so please put your questions into the chat. Take it away, Rebecca and Sharon.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, and Jennifer and Lisa working behind. Thank you, first of all of you for joining us tonight. I hope you're comfortable at home on this night to be home. I guess I would say, maybe with a hot tea or maybe something stronger. No judgment. And I myself may or might not be just dressed from the top. Maybe later I'll show you the sweats I'm wearing below. And so I'm going to start by asking just the way I'm going to do this. I should say I'm like most people, I'm exhausted. So if you could just be a little patient here. So, and so thank you again for joining. And for any non-Jews here, thank you for showing up and showing your support. We really appreciate it. So first I'll be asking Sharon some questions, and then we'd love to hear questions from you, either about the book, the publishing process. So please ask them in the chat Q&A. And we'd really also like to hear your own stories about the glory days of department stores or your memories. So please share them with us because we'd like to hear these stories. So for those of you who have not read the book yet, and of course, you're going to race to Amazon and order it right after this, I'm sure. I'm just going to read a review that just came in yesterday about Sharon's book, which has ranked #1 on Amazon. So congratulations, Sharon, for being a best-selling author.
Yay, thank you.
Yes, congratulations. It's a huge accomplishment. So I'm just going to read a short review that sort of sums up the book because I want you to read the book. And this just came in yesterday from a reviewer named Erin Britton from the Los Angeles Book Review. And this is what she had to say. Step into the glamorous world of 1950s Montreal with the most amazing department store by Sharon Neiss Arbess and follow two Jewish women, Lily and Vivian, as they boldly confront prejudice and societal expectations while working at the iconic Sutherlands. After a whistle-stop tour of the women's pasts, Neiss Arbess immerses readers in the genteel atmosphere of the department store, where upscale elegance coexists with oppression and exploitation. Readers will root for Lily and Vivian as they take on dangers initially masked by the luxurious facade of Sutherland's, an unlikely setting for generation-defining conflicts. Inspired by true events, the novel captures the essence of a bygone era, blending whimsy, romance, and historical injustices into a story of perseverance against odds that unfolds within the walls of a department store that was once the epitome of luxury and sophistication. So Sharon and we just held your launch party last week at Holy Blossom. And so I'm not sure how many people here were there, but hopefully we're going to ask some new questions today and learn a little more about you. And I said this last week, the first thing I always do with any book is I go to the acknowledgement page because I think you can learn a lot about the author and get a more personal connection by reading the acknowledgements and who they thank. So that's my little tip. But so I'm going to ask you about that. We're going to start sort of like I said at the end, at the acknowledgement, which is actually really the beginning of your book. So one of the acknowledgements that you mentioned, and one that especially stood out, was the thank you to your daughter Liv. And you wrote, "Thank you for bringing home that piece of information that has now become this novel." So Sharon, what was that piece of information that your daughter brought home, and how did it lead to writing this novel?
Excellent question. So my daughter came home from visiting a friend from Montreal, and as she dumped her bag on the floor, she said so nonchalantly, "Yeah, the my friend's grandmother told me that my great-grandmother and his great-grandmother worked together at Simpson's department store in the 1950s." And my world just stopped, and I said, "What? How could that be? That coincidence?" And that's all I could think about for weeks. And then later, I decided to ask my girlfriend to get her opinion because I always overreact. And I asked her, "Am I overreacting of this coincidence?" And she said, "Absolutely not. This is crazy." And so I right away started thinking of the image of these two women in the 1950s at a department store where women really didn't work that much, and what they did during their coffee breaks, how were they treated, what were their conversations like. And then it's all I could think about, and I decided, well, I might as well start writing about it, and that's how it all started.
So I love hearing that story. I could listen to it over and over again because it's such a seed that's planted. You also thank in the acknowledgements your parents and your Auntie Dory
Yes.
for, as you wrote, sharing pieces of your mother's story, especially those on which this novel is loosely based on. Can you share what that pieces they shared with you?
Absolutely. So the one quote that really stands out and really gave me a basis of understanding of how my grandmother was treated at Simpson's was when she applied for the job, her boss or the person who hired her said, "We don't normally hire Jews." So right then and there, that's all I needed. I needed that vision, that quote, and then I was able to run with it and to create dialogue and scenes. And I could just imagine how she felt and how after that she was told that she still took the job and she still continued. That to me is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't recognize how sort of anti-Semitic Canada was pretty recently, I would say. My grandfather too had to change his last name to get a job here, so I can relate to that.
Mhm.
Um, so this is historical fiction, and like we said, it is inspired by true events. What are some other facts, true facts, that are in your novel, The Most Amazing Department Store?
True facts. Well, that was like the main quote that I can think of right now. But in terms of other facts, oh yes, just remembered something. I actually brought in something that happened to me in the mid 90s that I thought would be an interesting storyline. So I just started, before I became a novelist, I was working as a copywriter in an advertising firm. And it was the fall and Rosh Hashanah was coming up. And I had to ask my boss for the time off so I can go to shul. And I was nervous. I didn't know my rights. I guess I was naive. I didn't know that I could. I mean, today I think it's very different. So I remember gathering up the courage and walking over to my boss and asking him for the days off. And then he responded to me with, "Why don't you take your holiday on a different day?" And I just shook my head and I basically said, "That's like celebrating Christmas on December 23rd," which is, it doesn't make sense. Anyhow, so he just didn't understand. And so I went to human resources and well, he wasn't very happy with me after that. So I brought that scenario that happened in 1997 to the story, to the Most Amazing Department Store. I had Lily become all nervous, asking for her boss for the time off, the same feeling that I went through 40 years later.
Hmm. That's interesting. I'm sure human resources loved you after that.
Well, they thankfully they couldn't believe that he told me that, and so of course I had the time off.
No, good. Um, and also in your acknowledgments, because we want to get to know you better, you write, you actually thank even that 10-foot nail polish shelf that I had to clean from top to bottom when I was 17 years old. So
Mhm.
talk to us about that job, which in the novel, when you when these when anyone started working at Sutherland's, the department
Sunderland,
store,
yeah.
they had to start in the basement and dust off all the shoe boxes for days and days
Yeah,
on end.
yeah.
So
So my
tell us
first
about your
job,
cleaning.
yeah. I do like to clean, but when I was 17, I was definitely not as a neat freak that I am now, to be perfectly honest. But I was working in a drugstore as a cosmetician, and as my initiation, my boss brought me over to the nail polish stand, and it was a 10-foot tower with many different kinds of nail polishes, and there was lots of dust because of construction. So she gave me the cleaning tools and she said, in the morning and in between customers, I need you to clean it from top to bottom. And this was 1987, and I did not have a phone to complain to my parents or to my friends. I just said, okay. And it took me a full week to get from top to bottom, but I really felt accomplished and I felt it grounded me. And I just felt great about it because it was a very clean nail polish rack afterwards. And so I decided to bring that experience into the book. But of course, I want to make it a little more dramatic and put everyone in the basement, make it a little more scary, a little more lonely, and I guess dramatic.
Was that your first job in retail?
It was.
Did you have any other jobs in retail?
No, just I
No,
worked in a
your first.
drugstore for a couple of years. Yeah. And then, of course, summer camp and then the advertising agencies.
Okay, so like I said at the beginning, we're all exhausted here because of the past, 7 weeks. And I think it's important to bring up the fact that this book was published way before October 7th,
It was.
when the world has changed. Um, and the fact that you cover a lot of anti-Semitism in your novel, The Most Amazing Department Store. I think I counted 22 incidences, ranging
Oh,
from the small ones where, no, you can't say oi, to almost like pranks. There's this one scene that really got me where a woman comes in with her little girl, and it was like a prank, except it was totally anti-Semitic, and she was treating Lily, a Jewish worker there, in the shoe department, and she kept saying, "No, I want a size 6." And Lily would run and get a size 6, and she'd come back, and then
yeah.
the shopper would be like, "No, I wanted a size 7." And Lily would go get a size 7, and then she'd come back, and the shopper would be like, "No, I said a size 6." And this went on for a bit. And then I think the little girl said something like "dirty Jew," and she started giggling. So I counted 22 incidences, like
Mhm.
I said, from the subtle to the outright just cruel. Um, and so does this book now take on sort of a different meaning to you after
And
number
I
7?
didn't, of course, I didn't know this would happen when I was writing it 2 years ago. And I remember writing that scene on my grandmother's couch in my living room. And it just all poured out of me. And I just let it bleed onto my laptop. And I didn't plan it sometimes, and I know that you can relate to this. When you're writing it, you just let it happen, and the story just came out. It just came out of me for some reason, and I'm actually pretty proud of that chapter because it's very meaningful, and it carries a lot of lessons and perspectives. And from that chapter, my main goal was to shine a light on what was happening in Canada during the 1930s and 40s and 50s, in particular, how anti Semitism was surfaced. And so, little subtle by teasing by a shoe size, and then, the little girl hears what the mother probably says in the kitchen, you dirty Jew, and so she probably just imitates that from what she's taught. And then also another part, what came out from the chapter was the support, the friendship that Vivian and Lily had. Vivian knew that something was wrong, that Lily was struggling. She could hear her from the other department from downstairs, and she ran upstairs to coach her, to be there for her, to support her. And that, I think, is very important. And I want the reader to take this seriously. What we're all going through now is very difficult. We can't go through this alone. We need our friends, we need our community, and we need the support to band together and to be there for each other, to talk about it. And that's what friends in our community is for. And that's what Vivian and Lily were for each other.
And yeah, and to that point, Vivian and Lily are different in in sense, which is one of them hides her Jewishness, and the other is pretty open about it, and actually is argues with the other one about, why are you hiding your Jewishness? Why did you decide to make one character hide their Jewishness and the other be loud and proud about it, especially
I
at
think
that
it's
time?
interesting. I think it's interesting to have two characters that get along so well, but are also very different, and they learn from each other. And Vivian may have been a little more naive and a little more scared, where Lily had more chutzpah, more, she left her husband, so she definitely had more courage, and she was a little more brave. And they both learned from each other.
Um, yeah, and to that point about learning, obviously, as a publisher, I want to sell as many books as possible. So I'm not saying this is a book just for Jewish people. So for non-Jewish readers, what do you hope that they get out of this? And do you think they will get it, the subtle anti-Semitism?
I hope so. I mean, I really hope that this book travels beyond the Jewish community. I hope that, um, first of all, I hope that Jews connect over the story, over shared history. But for people outside the Jewish community, are there? there are our allies, and they will deepen an understanding of the Jewish experience. And then people with little understanding or a little interaction with the Jewish community will hopefully gain some insight and take a step back. And then from what they see and hear that's all around them, maybe they'll question and ask themselves, does this feel right? What am I chanting? Does this make sense? That's what I hope, that they will gain some insight from this story.
And also, I mean, I did a lot of research when I was, you know, thinking about taking on your book and everything. And one of the things, one interesting stat that I came across was that all department stores by the year, I think it was 2025, will pretty much be extinct. So, you know, we can all blame Amazon or or whatever, but yeah, the big department stores are struggling to remain relevant, and we all know that Amazon is one big, you know, online department store. So how did you capture the spirit of the glory days of department stores? And what kind of research did you do?
Well, I remember a lot when I was a little girl and going into department stores and getting that special service. And it was such a treat to go. And then I went online, and in the middle of COVID, where everyone was making sourdough bread, I was researching a Gibson roll. It's not something you eat. And how people take makeup off in the 1945. I was just researching all these like malls, department store scenes, how people interacted, their clothing, fashion, makeup. I also am a collector of old magazines, and I find that the advertisements are so comforting. They're beautiful, and found a lot of information about Revlon, and that's why I chose Revlon to be like the main cosmetic line that I repeat over and over again in the book. So a lot of research is out there online, and what I remember as a child. And also, I asked people, I asked my parents, I asked my aunts what it was like to go shopping in a department store in the 1950s. It was a real adventure. It was a treat.
Can we just go back to that makeup remover in the 1950s? I'm curious because I have to take this makeup off after. What did they use this makeup
Cold
remover?
cream, lots of cold cream. That was
Cold
like the
cream.
main product they used to remove the makeup.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah,
Good to know. Thank you.
yeah.
Um, actually, and back to that research, one of your characters, she grows up and she is obsessed with reading Vogue magazine. And she's actually, you know, we would call them in modern days, she's like, you know, a fashion police, right? And she could be very kind of straightforward, a little cruel if she um didn't like what someone was wearing, to the point where she would I mean, I'm laughing because, you know, she criticized her teacher when she was younger. She criticized her what the teacher was wearing, and she would come home often. Um, Also going back in time where she was slapped on the hands with a wooden, was it a wooden spoon or a
Wednesday.
wooden stick? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So did you read Vogue as a child? Did you read fashion magazines or
No.
no? That's
I am not a fashionista at all, believe it or not. Like but I so appreciate people who are. And those who are in my life, I'm watching them very closely and I observe them and I write about them. So, as a writer, and then you could appreciate this, I'm always watching. I love watching people who are really good at their craft, whatever they do.
speaking of craft, so book buyers have three, or publishers, let's say, people have 3 seconds to look at a cover before they move on to another one. So the cover has to be on point, the title has to be on point, and it's very rare that I get a manuscript where I don't change the title. But your manuscript came in and with the title "The Most Amazing Department Store." It's such a simple, catchy title. How did you come up with it? Did it come to you at night, or I'm curious. I actually have never asked you this before.
Yeah, it's actually I did it pretty quickly, and I have a little trick. So I knew I wanted to have the department store in the title for sure, but I write a lot of blogs or articles on my website, and there's something called the I forget the term, but when you write the title in your blog, you get an attract like a score. So I
Oh, is
typed
that
in the most
Grammarly?
not Grammarly, and a search something with a search engine. You just get a percentage out of 100 of like a score for your title. It just comes up when you type it in. So I typed in the most amazing department store and I got a 94. I said, well, there's my title.
And it's a
It
good
was
one too,
really
because
quick.
it hadn't been it hasn't been taken. Whenever I get a book, and the first thing I do if I come up with a title is I look on Amazon to see if there's another book with that title.
Of course
And
I
so
checked.
yeah, it's quite interesting when you have a title and you look on Amazon to see if there's any other books with that same
Yeah,
title.
of course, before I chose it, I definitely checked to make sure that nothing was published like that. And then in terms of the cover, I had nothing to do with it. It was all your team, and you gave me a choice of 4, and I chose that one, and I was like, "That's it." I just knew right away, and so did you.
And I wanted to ask you to we all know names are quite important in Jewish tradition. So how did you come up with the two names, Vivian and Lily, for
Well,
your
Lily's the actual name
protagonists?
of my grandmother, of my paternal grandmother. And then Vivian, I just really love the name and I actually have a really close girlfriend named Vivian, but she is nothing like her at all. Except that maybe she's a bit of a fashionista. And she does research things that she buys very thoroughly. She's like very careful about what she buys. But other than that, she is nothing like her at all. And of course, before I even typed her name on my laptop, I called her up and I asked permission. And of course, she said yes.
Oh, that's sweet. And
Mhm.
also, um, I like to publish books that people will want to keep. So I'm just going to hold this up and show you. They're called end papers, which is the inside here, and because I guess they're at the end. And
I
you
love
chose
that.
to have lilies. Is that because of your grandmother?
Yeah, and also I love lilies. And one of the first books that you publish, I was noticing your inside flap, and sometimes you have like for your financial book, make money your thing. You have dollar signs. I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And then you also have flowers for another book too, I think. So I wanted to choose my flower, so I chose a lily because I do love lilies.
Okay, so I'm just going to read a quote, and I don't know who to attribute it to because it's plastered on every actor's face. But this is a quote about writers.
Hmm.
The mind of a writer can be a truly terrifying thing. Isolated, neurotic, caffeine addled, crippled by procrastination, and consumed by feelings of panic, self loathing, and soul crushing inadequacy. And that's on a good day. So, did you feel any of that? Because when
Oh
writers come
yes.
to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, I can't do this," I say, "Congratulations, you're a writer."
Yeah, without a doubt, what you definitely described, I have felt those feelings many of occasions. Writing is a very lonely job, but it's also a very exciting one, and it's also really full of promise. So it's all about perspective. So I'm so fortunate that I'm able to write. The feeling that I get when I'm on my way to my favorite neighborhood coffee shop in the wee hours of the morning where nobody's up and it's still dark outside, and I'm walking down to the coffee shop and I get to sit and have a cup of coffee and nobody's around for 2, 3 hours and just let it bleed on my laptop. That to me is pure bliss, happiness.
Happiness. We call that in the writing world, we say, "Are you a member of the 5 a.m. club?" Which means we get up at 4:30. We start writing at 5, and then we get our kids off to school at 7:30 or get them awake at 7:30. So yeah, I mean, I'm a member of the 5 a.m. Writers
No,
Club.
I'm
You?
not a member of the
Yep.
5 a.m. club. So my kids are grown. My older one has a job and he's on his own, and obviously, and so my other two are queens. So my life is very different now. And so my mornings are mine. And so I don't drive carpool anymore. And so I'm able to go where I want in the morning. So it's definitely a life change. And I now have the time to really focus on it, and I'm grateful for that.
Um, and now we're coming up to Hanukkah in a short while. And I asked this question at your book launch, and I'm still laughing over it because of the response. You're from Montreal. So, and I threw it out. All I said was, okay, you're from Montreal. So bagels, Montreal, New York, or Toronto. And the crowd just went kind of crazy yelling out where their favorite bagels from. But I'm going to move on to latkes. So in my family, my poor mom, we're quite divided on the latke situation. Uh, and that means I really like them like crispy and soft on the inside. How do you like your latkes? And do you like anything on them or not?
You bet. So, I think that like my son Josh and I were like a tag team. So I would grate and he would fry. So I like them definitely oily and crispy. And then I'm a sour cream gal, not applesauce.
Oh, I like that.
Mhm.
Same. And speaking of food, let's get back to your book for a minute.
Mhm.
Vivian and Lillian, they go to every Wednesday, they start going to a diner called Beauties, which is based on a real diner called Beauties.
Yep.
And you described it as sort of United Bakery um situation, like a little more
Yeah,
United
so for those who
Dairy.
don't live in Toronto, United Bakers is a diner that started in the Toronto ghetto. I forget where the Toronto ghetto was. I think in the 1920s, and then it moved to Bathurst and Lawrence Plaza, I think in the 80s. Anyhow, it's one of my favorite restaurants. I love going there. It's so nostalgic. It's just so warm and comforting. And Beauties is similar, a little fancier, but it definitely has a lot of history. I think it's been around since the 1940s. And so I never went with my grandmother. However, my mother used to go there because she used to teach at Bancroft School. And then she used to go to Beauties on her lunch breaks. And she would have half salmon, half tuna. And then recently, I went up to the granddaughter of the owner of Beauties, who I'm friendly with, and I told her that. And she said, yeah, my grandmother probably made that sandwich for her. And that to me, that's it. I mean, that story is precious. It's just lovely and it's nostalgic and it just opens up so much love and care and history. It's great.
So United Bakery, let's just talk about this for a second. I will tell you my favorite order, and I want to know your
Okay.
favorite order. Okay.
Okay.
I love that place too. So for me, it's the pea soup and the Greek salad. Go, you.
That's a popular
Same?
one. For me, I usually make my own omelet with cottage cheese, spinach, onion, tomato, and a toasted bagel.
Nice. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, we should go for lunch one day.
I love
To
that.
United. Um, so the other interesting thing about your book, your novel, is that the independence of these women. So Lily is divorced, so she wants to be self-sufficient,
Mhm.
and Vivian is just a spitfire whose, mother wants her to marry a doctor and settle down, and she just wants to work and work her way all the way up.
Mhm.
Um, and on the other side, the shoppers at that time, it was um, a slice of independence for women too, to go out for the day. It was acceptable for them to go out for the day and spend the day at a department store getting their hair done, looking at the cosmetic counter, having lunch. Um, was it important to you to include the independence of these women? Because I just remember my bubby saying to me, she would always pull me aside and she would say, "Get your driver's license, get your driver's license," because that's independence. Because back then, a lot of women didn't get their driver's license. And so I always remember that. And I like the idea. So why was it important for you, for your characters to be independent females?
I wanted Vivian to be a go-getter and to feel like she wanted to work at Sunderland so badly. She would spy when she was younger. Mr. Sand saw her sneaking around. He hired her so young and she was so naive, but she was so knowledgeable. And even though she did have she kind of went off and told people like you shouldn't be wearing that skirt when that's not really the nice thing to say. But she was groomed, and it took her a while. But she was so ambitious, and I wanted to represent an ambitious young woman. And then, of course, there's Lily who needed to get a job and to show her independence, to show that she could stand on her own 2 feet. So I wanted to represent two strong women in the 1950s that took the world by storm and did well for
Yeah, and
themselves.
it's interesting that just the divorce too, because she was ashamed she was
Yes.
divorced. Can you talk about you know, uh, about that time and why you included divorce and the shame that was around
Well, it was
during
it
that
was
time?
so rare, and I chose to write about her divorce because I wanted to celebrate her strength as a woman of that generation, and what she did was a true act of courage. So I
Yeah.
wanted to point that out.
Um, and you were born and raised in Montreal.
I was.
So, and you've lived here for how many years have you been in
I've been here
Toronto?
since '96.
96. Okay, so you've been here a while. So tell us what you miss about Montreal.
I miss the beauty of the city. It's smaller. You can go to the Laurentians in an hour. Um, Small knit community. Um, And that's really about it. I have to say I'm very happy in Toronto. I moved here for a reason. So,
And and in our brief chat before this, you were telling me that a lot of people are coming up to you and telling you their own stories about those days, those glory
yeah,
days, the Mecca
it's
of
really
luxury. And
it's
so, what are people saying to you about?
well, Amazon is taking its sweet time, delivering the books, but they're coming in now. And then once they're coming in now, people are reading it right away. And then they're coming up to me and telling me that I remember when my grandmother used to take me to Eaton's and we'd have lunch, and it was such an occasion. And we used to go to Simpson's and telling about their grandparents, and they used to be a tailor, and just stories about their grandparents and how special the relationship was. It's just lovely that these stories are surfacing, and we need to keep telling our stories. And that's the important thing. I want people to talk about it.
And I always ask this, but when I was a writer, people ask me all the time, like, how do you write? And I always say I write as if no one is going to read this, else I couldn't write it. Um, did you have any? Did you have any
Schedule,
difficulties? Pardon me?
like a schedule or challenges.
Yeah. Any challenges?
Of course, I challenges. I mean, with any job, there's no job that's easy, I don't think. So I have like a calendar, and then I make sure to block off 2 to 3 hours of writing time a day. It's not all day. I mean, Judy Blume writes for an hour in the morning. I research as I know this. Stephen King writes in the morning, then walks his dog and has lunch. So I'm the type of person that I usually write in the afternoons, sometimes the morning. It depends. I just flip it around. And then there's writer's block. And that happens a lot. And I've learned it's not best to fight it. So when it happens, or when I start typing gibberish and not making sense, not putting sentences together, I step away from the laptop, I leave, I usually go for a walk, maybe a run, and then it just comes out. And then I have to stop what I'm doing and write it down. But I let it go, and then it just surfaces in a day or two, whatever the block is. It's actually pretty fascinating.
And one of the questions I love when I get to interview authors or writers is superstitions. And I will tell you, I have this robe that, oh my gosh, my daughter's so mortified when she has friends come over, but it's more than 20 years old and it's just disgusting. But it's my writer's robe and I need it to write. It's a superstition.
Yeah.
And just speaking back to you, Stephen King, I read that whenever he finishes a book, and maybe this is why he's such a prolific writer, but he has a cigarette at the end. When he's finished a
Oh,
book, he has a cigarette. And that's his treat. Do you have any writing superstitions? And what did you do when you finished a book? Did you celebrate some way?
well,
Hopefully not with a cigarette, but you know.
I don't have any superstitions because I don't believe in that personally. Although, I did switch my computer. I had my laptop for 10 years, and I have to admit, moving on to my a new laptop, I was like, "Oh, am I gonna be able to write on this? I'm so used to this laptop." It was kind of, ugh, but I'm getting into it, and I think I'll be all right. And what did I do when I finished? I don't remember. It was almost like, "Okay, oh my god, I'm done. I think I'm done." It was almost surreal, and I didn't think that I was done, but I was done. And I think I went out for dinner. I'm not even sure because it was such a I did so many edits and I rewrote it, and you know how it is. I actually don't remember, like, I'm done. I don't remember that, so
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know how many people work behind one book and how many times it goes back and forth from author to editor to different kinds of editors. There's like 4 different kinds of editors that work on a
yeah.
book and all different reasons. Um, and this was your first, you have published 2 other books. One I will mention because I loved it, Me and My So-Called Friends, and you
Thank you.
self-published it. And so Most Amazing Department Stories, your sort of first debut adult fiction, first of all, although I think teenagers would enjoy it as well.
Mhm.
Um, um, so what did anything surprise you about the traditional route versus self-publishing?
I like traditional publishing much better because I love working with a team, especially your team.
Okay.
I love it's fun. I'm not it's the truth. Deanna, the editor, was fantastic. She was patient. She told me like exactly what I needed to change, what I need to improve on, what I needed to explore more, and I did it bit by bit, day by day, and it was just a pleasure working with her. And now that I'm working with your PR team, it's lovely. I'm not solely relying on all of their connections. I have some connections too, and I love calling her up on the phone and saying, let me call this person or let me call that person, and what could I do, to help, and how can we work together? Because it's so much more fun to work as a team.
It is. I agree. Yeah, the whole book, the whole purpose of rebooks is that every author helps each other, so we become sort of
Mhm.
like this big family of. And I only publish females, so this females and on that note, let's end with why was it important to have to focus on friendship? Because I think people are always fascinated with female friendships.
Yeah, I guess it's a different change than, finding Mr. Right or Mrs. Right and falling in love and living happily ever after. I didn't want to go there. I wanted to celebrate female friendships and how important they are and how much we need them in our lives. Our partners are very important. And I love my husband, but I also love my friends and I lean on them and I hope that I'm a good friend to them too.
And it is hard when a friendship breaks up
Mhm.
I think it's even more heartbreaking than a romantic relationship if you've been friends with someone for many years and
Mhm.
maybe they betray you in some way. I'm not giving anything away in the novel. And last silly question, because why not? We need some levity after today and the past few weeks. So, desert island. I'm not going to ask you what you would bring. First of all, you are the one who says suggested this question, but I'm going to put a twist on it. So,
Okay.
one of your characters works in the shoe department. The other
Okay.
character works in the cosmetic department. You're
Mhm.
on a desert island. Would you bring cosmetics or shoes?
Oh, cosmetics. Take
Okay.
a moment and think about it. Yeah, cosmetics, of course. No
All right.
shoes. I'll be barefoot.
um, I think should we? I think we should open it up to audience questions.
That'd be lovely. Okay, Lisa, take it away.
Yes.
Great idea. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you both so much for being here with us tonight. It was a lot of fun, and I personally look forward to reading the book. As I mentioned to Sharon and Rebecca, I'll definitely hunker down over the holidays and, get cozy with the book. It's going to be a read that will distract me from the horrible, awful news that we're certainly, reading every single day. So thank you for writing it. Thank you
Oh,
for
thank you.
weaving into it so many important themes. The anti-Semitism, this, the bringing back the nostalgia and the glory days of wonderful department stores that we all have such fond memories of. And certainly going to, you called it an adventure, and I would say it was an event, something that I certainly look forward to whenever I went with a family member, and there was always food involved of some sort, so that made it even more special. And hopefully somebody bought me something, so that was definitely a treat. So we're going to open it up to questions, and I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you, Sharon, was what was your favorite department store when you were a kid?
I would have to say, as a kid, Eaton's, because it was in the Cavendish Mall and it was the only department store, the only one I knew of. So it would have to be that. And then, of course, when I got older, it was Ogilvy's. And there's a story behind that one.
Okay.
So in the mid 90s, MAC Cosmetics was the line. And so my girlfriend and I used to walk downtown for on a Saturday afternoon, and we walked to Ogilvy's. And the MAC store was on the corner and it was packed. And there was this guy who was dressed in black with so much confidence, and people were waiting in line for him to brush a eyeshadow and the shade of bone. I just know this. And he would just go like this. And everyone was like waiting for that moment alone with him. And I'll never forget that image. And back in the early 90s, having a male cosmetician was quite rare, as it is compared to today. So it was such a like, oh my God, there he is. And we just all stand and watch and wait. So I brought that excitement of this guy and the popularity of him to Vivian when she was the lipstick girl at Sunderland's.
That
Actually, Vivian would be what we call an influencer right now because
She would.
she became very famous for her choices in cosmetics. She became a
Mhm.
superstar. Yeah.
that's great. And one of our guests wrote, Ogilvy, such an iconic Montreal store.
It is. It actually just combined with Holtz, so it's beautiful to see.
We unfortunately in Toronto never had Ogilvy, so I don't even know what that experience was like.
Oh,
Um, but I have to say, I remember being a child and going to Eaton's in Toronto, and at the time, they had a wooden escalator. I don't know if you remember the old wooden escalators.
I was living in Toronto then.
Okay. So, and they actually have old wooden escalators at Macy's in New York City. It's still there. And why do I know this? Because I forget everything in my life, but this I remember because I swear to God, because
as a child, I was petrified. It went really quickly, and I was petrified because unlike a lot of escalators now where they've got like a yellow line so you can see where the brake is so you know where to step, I
Mhm.
didn't know where to step, and I was petrified that my feet would get caught in the wooden slats. And I would stand at the top of the escalator crying because I was so afraid to get on. So fast forward many, many years ago, about, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, my husband and I were in New York City and we were at Macy's. And they had a wooden escalator. And I'm in my 50s and I am completely, utterly frozen with fear. And if you know me, I'm not someone who shows fear or gets afraid very easily, but I actually had a panic attack in
Oh,
Macy's at the top of the escalator. I couldn't get on. My husband was like, "Oh my God, what is," and I'm crying. I am a 50-plus-year-old woman standing and crying. I can't get on this escalator because it brought me back to being that child at Eton.
oh,
If you can believe it, I
oh,
had to stop them.
Lisa. Oh my
And
gosh.
so he literally had to get on the escalator ahead of me, turned around, and he pulled me on with him. And I held his hands. I was like so tightly. I was so scared. So it's funny because of what, you remember about that wasn't necessarily a positive memory about a department store, but man, oh man, things certainly, sear in your brain about the department store era. So
Yeah.
just a funny nostalgic memory about being a child of Eaton's. We don't really seem to have any other questions. I don't know
Hmm.
if Lynn has any questions, but I'm going to just, give a bit of an update on our partners in Israel that we're supporting through our emergency campaign. And if anyone who's watching the webinar decides, oh, wait, I've got a question, by all means, continue to type it in the chat and I'll stop and read it. So CHW, the emergency campaign has raised over 2.5 million since October 7th, and we're very proud that we have transferred over 2.4 million to our three main partners in Israel, and that being Hadassah Hospital, Shamir Medical Center, and WIZO. Hadassah Hospital has put a greater focus right now on rehabilitation for both its citizens and soldiers. And along with that, are rushing through the completion of the new Gandel Rehabilitation Center, which is located at Mount Scopus. And this is a massive rehabilitation center that will serve over 10,000 patients with about 132 beds. It's so desperately needed in the Jerusalem area and surrounding areas because, as we know, one of the biggest priorities, as the war continues and hopefully ends swiftly, will be rehabilitation for both citizens and soldiers. And one of the most important treatments for these types of patients will be neurologic care for injuries of the brain, spinal cord, and nervous system. So that's an update on Hadassah Hospital and its current needs and what we're going to be funding. CHW is going to be making an announcement soon about a new project that we'll be supporting specifically for the Gandel Rehabilitation Center. Shamir Medical Center is, for those that listened to the webinar last week, heard how close Shamir Medical Center is located near the border of Gaza, and it's only 37 miles from the Gaza border, and has been since October 7th receiving patients being flown in from the battlefield, and is a backup for two frontline hospitals in Beersheba and Ashkelon. It's activated its mass casualty triage protocol very quickly to deal with a variety of severity of injuries, and opened up their underground emergency hospital space to deal with some of the most injured patients. But what they've also initiated is a national center for the conjoined treatment of PTSD, combining psychological and psychiatric treatment with groundbreaking hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So this is a new center that they've opened, and are going to be dealing with a lot of the psychological trauma that both the civilians and soldiers have been experiencing since October 7th. So this is so critical. And then lastly, our partner being WIZO, focus more on the social service side and providing women and at-risk children support through shelters, support through the safety net program. Over 390 women have been supported through the safety net program, which CHW proudly funds. They've opened up all the daycare centers, especially those in 7 major hospitals. Some are operating at limited capacity because of the need to be able to mobilize the children and get them into a safe room quickly. They only have 90 seconds, and so they're not operating at full capacity, but they have opened over 11 daycare centers, and they're also distributing all kinds of supplies and food and clothing, hygiene items and games and toys to families, over 30,000 families across Israel who have been displaced, as well as providing care packages and food packages to soldiers. And lastly, through the there's 3 main distress lines that WIZO operates. They're fielding over 3,500 calls from victims of domestic violence, those who are just looking for someone to talk to that are just feeling so isolated and afraid. And WIZO is the only organization that has a hotline, distress line for men who either have abused their wives, or feel that they're at risk of abusing their wives. So that's sort of an update on how CHW has been supporting our partners and what our partners are doing on the ground. We do have a few questions now, so I will just read those. Oh, to Susan. Hi, Mummy from Rowan. No, sorry, this is to Rebecca. This is from Susan's iPad. Hi, Mummy from Rowan. I guess she's with Bubby and Zeta, so I just thought I'd
She
share
is
that.
having a sleepover with Bubby and Zeta. She's actually in town this week for she studies in Boston. So she's in town for the week for American Thanksgiving.
Very nice. Well, she said she can't wait to read the book, and great interview. So I just wanted to share that. Question from one of our donors who said that she grew up in New York. She remembers going to department stores in Manhattan with her mother in the 50s, shopped at the department stores because they offered credit, and her father's business was very seasonal, hence the need for credit. What is credit like in Montreal?
Sharon, that's for you.
What do you mean? What's credit like in Montreal? I'm
I don't
not
know.
sure.
Was there? No, I think like in that time period, could you put things on credit in department stores in Montreal?
And honestly, I didn't cover that in the book, and I don't know.
You have to, yeah. We're all going to Google this afterwards.
I don't know.
Somebody else has asked, what do you hope that girls and women and/or Jews will take away from your book? What's the takeaway that you want?
That is an excellent question. So 3 things. So first, I hope that people enjoy a light, entertaining read and learn some valuable lessons. I hope that the Jewish people who read the book will connect over a shared history and find strength in each other, to worship, to cherish their friendships and community, and to just be together and to support each other. And then for people outside of the Jewish community, our allies will have a deeper understanding of the Jewish experience. And people with little connection to a Jewish person will hopefully gain some insight and will take a step back and from witnessing what they're seeing and hearing to question, does this feel right? Does this make sense what I'm chanting, before following or ignoring it? Hopefully ignoring it.
Yeah.
That's what I hope.
One last question. One of our our donors has said, my most memorable time at department stores was the experience of the elevators and the elevator operators wearing white gloves and announcing each floor and what was sold on each floor. I guess, wonder if you have memories like that, and what were the experiences you had?
I don't remember any elevators with men with white gloves, unfortunately. No, that didn't happen to me. Did it happen to you, Rebecca?
No, but sometimes they do it when you go to the theater. Sometimes they still have those very old elevators with the man. I always love them.
Feels very luxurious somehow, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It just has that luxury feeling.
Mhm.
Here's a neat story. Someone wrote, my grandfather opened a department store which became the largest in Ottawa and remained so until the 1970s. When it was bought out by the Bay, my grandfather became the first president of the Zionist organization in Canada, and his wife, Lillian Friedman, was the first president of Canadian Hadassah-WIZO. I'm looking forward to reading this book.
Oh, that's
Wow,
nice.
what an amazing story.
I love
Wow.
that. See, look how those stories surface. It's amazing.
I
Yeah.
know. I wish I could just listen to these stories all day. I love hearing them.
So I guess what I just want to leave everyone with is, first of all, thank you again, both for being with us tonight and making this so
Pleasure.
enjoyable for us. We really, really appreciate it. And for those of you who are still with us, I just want to thank you all for joining us as well. To Lynn, thank you for providing welcoming remarks and being here. And for all of you, we're running a very, very special campaign next Tuesday. We've been very fortunate to receive some matching funds, about $50,000 in matching funds. And we're going to be able to match dollar for dollar everything that we raise on Tuesday. 100% of proceeds will go to our emergency appeal campaign and to Israel. So those who have not yet made a gift to CHWs, I'm sure you've supported lots of emergency campaigns so far, and we thank you for your generosity to the community. But every dollar that you do donate next Tuesday online at www.chw.ca/Israel will be matched dollar for dollar. That's for 24 hours, beginning at noon on Tuesday until noon on Wednesday. And consider this as an alternative to buying Hanukkah presents for your family this year. And let's help some families that really need it in Israel. Ladies, thank you so much again for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
we wish everyone a good evening. And thanks again. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.